We are in Tromsø at the Arctic Frontiers Conference in Norway, and I am now joined by Professor Gunhild Hoogensen Gjørv, a Professor of Security Studies and Geopolitics at the University of Norway. Professor, welcome to TVP World.
Thank you.
So I want to begin by asking you about the Arctic. I mean, it's something that you've studied for years, but now we're hearing that it's becoming this high tense region of conflict, of potential conflict. So what changed?
Yeah, it's in some respects nothing has changed, and in other respects everything has changed. So the parts of the things that have not changed, but it's also the way we perceive the Arctic. The Arctic, aside from the fact it's from the way we learn geography, it's the northernmost region of the globe, but it's actually very different regions within this northern region. So we have an Arctic that is like the Russian Arctic, the North American Arctic, and the European Arctic. And there are different climatic conditions, different political conditions, social conditions, and so forth. You know, so they're actually quite different regions. So it's very difficult to talk about the Arctic per se. It has been always an interest, like the security in the Arctic has been of interest, but it's been of interest in different ways over time. During the Cold War, it was basically that space where there was the best trajectory and the shortest line between, you know, Russia or the Soviet Union and the United States, and you send a missile over this way. Shortest.
I think it is still the shortest, right?
It is still the shortest, yeah. So that part hasn't changed. But now it's more complicated because the ways that we interact and the methods of threat and warfare have changed to actually engage the communities also within the Arctic, like hybrid threats and warfare. So you get this multi-level. It's not just a matter of missiles focusing on each other because we're in hostile conditions. This is after many decades of so-called Arctic exceptionalism or cooperation in the Arctic, which was also in the interest of Russia and the United States at that time. Now it's quite different, but we also see different types of approaches to try to destabilize countries without going into full-out, large-scale violent conflict.
Can you give us an example of that? I mean, we've heard about drones, for example. Is that one example? I mean, hybrid threats is kind of your forte as well.
So there's multiple techniques, you could say, or tactics in the hybrid threat spectrum. And for me, I could talk about this forever. So it's a broad range of activities to try to collect information about the different countries, but also to use that information against us. So you can see different types of information campaigns, disinformation campaigns, influence operations through, like, say, conspiratorial theories to spread these around.
But I mean, from Russia, right? Because we need to specify
from Russia,
here.
but it can be from other. It can be also from non-state actors that are working in tandem with Russia, if they wish, or not. It can be also from China as well. And these are the ones that we usually look to that are interested in this kind of information at the moment. But it's that, it can be gathering of information through the use of drones. Other forms of espionage can be intelligence officers that are on the ground, use of illegals.
I guess we've seen this in the past, right? So what is new here now?
I would say what's new, because you're absolutely right, especially intelligence, right? I mean, we've always had people collecting intelligence on each other. As a matter of fact, it's a source of stability. I know all about you, and I know where you're at, so we're chill, we're good. But now it's been collecting of information with an intent of finding out what are, or more so, not just now, but it's more so focusing on our vulnerabilities. What are our weaknesses? And in democratic societies, we're more open than authoritarian societies, so our weaknesses are actually all out on the table. Easier to identify and to go do deep dives on. So we have this sort of information gathering as well as, like espionage, like I say, and sabotage and such. A lot of what makes it different today is technology. So even though this has been old practice from a long time ago, technology has made it that we can gather information like this, let's say drones, but also just using our mobile phones, which was taken away from me now. But you know that those things are so particularized to us that these are sources, or can be sources of disinformation as well as information collection and such, and it can be instantaneous, that you can get that information from millions of mobile phones, as well as disperse information that way. So these things, technology and drones, satellites, technology is doing it such that this under threshold type of threat activities to try to polarize us, increase our emotions towards hate, fear, mistrust, and doubt.
But hold on, but we could apply that to basically anywhere in Europe though, right?
Yeah.
What makes it specific to the Arctic? Is there a difference in intensity, for example?
No, I mean, if there's differences in intensity, it would be also differences in intensity across the Arctic. As I mentioned, the Arctic is not just one big blob. So you would see probably more activity taking place in the Nordic Arctic, the European Arctic, than say in the Canadian Arctic. Basically because communities are far more spread, far between. There's something like 130,000 people who live in this huge expanse of the Canadian Arctic, whereas we're more a few million who are living in the Nordic region, you know? So this is why, of course, it's different. So, but it's, I would say there's disinformation or like hybrid threat activities taking place all across Europe, but it's also taking place in the Arctic, and not least in a region that is far more in focus with regards to security issues today and geopolitics.
Now, when we talk about these hybrid threats and about Russia, I mean, as we are speaking right now, I've seen some news that there is a Russian tanker carrying liquefied natural gas, LNG, across, I mean, not across, but along the coast of Norway. It's about 500 kilometers from here right now, going towards Russia. And I mean, we've seen these shadow fleet tankers pass not only through the Baltic Sea, but also north of Norway and in the Arctic. So is this a major threat now? Is it also increasing in intensity?
Well, it rather depends, because I mean, it's like shipping goods that otherwise would not have been shipped, would not have been accessible to Russia, because of course there have been all these sanctions. So you have shadow fleets that are trying to ensure that Russia gets goods, or that Russia can sell goods elsewhere. This is coming into the sort of more legal parameters of the operation of ships, and it comes into marine security, or maritime security, as well as the legal frameworks that we have in place. So these things need to be monitored under those sorts of frameworks. Does it exacerbate sort of a hybrid threat picture? Yes and no, because the thing is that it depends on how we perceive it. The thing is that's different about a lot of hybrid threat activities. Contrary to a bomb that just lands on us, objectively, we're all toast. But hybrid threat activities, it's the way that we perceive those activities. If we have high trust levels, we may be less affected by these sorts of activities than if we have low trust levels, and then think that, oh, wait a minute, this is an indication that the system we are a part of is failing, and therefore I have no trust in the people around me, my government, and so forth. So it really depends on what our trust levels are and the ways in which we manage, we both identify, we inform the public, and how we manage the threat perception of these sorts of activities. So that's very crucial.
Now, you've mentioned in a panel here today that we are also often forgetting in these discussions about security and interest of countries, that we are forgetting about values, values like democracy, freedom. And now I'm curious because, you know, there is the case to be made here about how to protect these values. I mean, okay, we can talk about these values all day long, but unless we do something about it, I mean, are these values even there still? So my question to you is this. Do you believe that Europe should be doing more to protect these values?
Yeah, because actually our security is dependent on it. The security we experience today is very much embedded in democratic systems, democratic values, a rule-based order, and it's precisely this that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, said that is ruptured, this rules-based order. And it is up to us to decide what are we going to support. Actually, international law is a part of the framework, the structure for our own security. We have to be able to count on international law to ensure our security. We have to be able to count on the fact that democratic systems are functional so that we are able to live the lives that we live. If these values go away, our lives become patently different. When we can't trust each other anymore, we have to be we are far more restricted in our movements or whatever, because we end up in a more authoritarian kind of environment. We will notice that suddenly our security has changed patently. So these values, it isn't just kind of like a lovey-dovey kind of a thought. It's actually that's central to us building up kind of a new framework and a new type of cooperation around the world, saying these things mean something to our security, so we have to work together to protect them as much as we possibly can.
Okay, but now that presents a question, because you mentioned international law, but there is a case being made not only by analysts but also by officials now in Europe that international law is the very thing that's holding us back. For example, with the Russian Shadow Fleet, there is dozens of these tankers, about 35 of them passing through the Gulf of Finland weekly. So these numbers are enormous. And we are only seizing maybe, 7 ships last year, Europe did. So is there a case to be made here that maybe we should be acting more to protect these values, because are they really...
Outside of international law, you mean? Like just bypass international law? And
well, that's the question, like how should we proceed? Because
I think that's a slippery slope.
Right. But on one side we have international law, and then if we don't protect it, in a sense of we don't stop these ships, then it sends a message to these regimes like Russia, for example, that they can do whatever they want.
Well, on some levels, even with the presence of international law, countries can do whatever they want. And that hasn't started today. That's not necessarily something new. Russia breached international law, intervening in a sovereign state in Ukraine. The United States, no matter how they color it, breached international law going into Venezuela, going into Iraq. One can say, okay, Libya is a different case because it was